Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the 5th episode of our EPALE Malta webinars for 2023. My name is Natasha Fabri, and I represent the EPALE NSS Malta team. And with me today is Mariah Farrugia from our EU projects team as well. Today's webinar, Disability, Etiquette, and Access to Education, in collaboration with the Commission for the Rights for Persons with Disability. Just a reminder, this session is recorded and then shared on EPALE as a blog, with the video recording shared on our EPALE Malta YouTube channel and the audio webinar on SoundCloud as well. So thank you for joining us. Before getting into the webinar itself, let me just introduce what EPALE does here and our different initiatives, especially this year. We have a very packed year, in fact. So the EPALE NSS Malta team works within the Lifelong Learning Unit, which is within the Directorate for Research, Lifelong Learning and Employability, of course, within the Ministry for Education in Malta. This year, as I said, is very busy, so I want to give you a little bit of an update on various initiatives we have running right now. And we start from the biggest announcement we have today, this week really. We are delighted to announce the launch of the EPALE NSS Malta Awards 2023. The event itself will happen in October, but nominations for these awards are open now and will remain open until the 21st of July. So hurry, if you have someone that you feel should be nominated, please do so. And yes, so let me just give you an idea of what the awards are about. The awards are, our objective is to celebrate adult learning in Malta, obviously, because this is, of course, the core of EPALE and what it stands for. So this year we will be celebrating the best adult learner in Malta, the best adult educator in Malta, and then also the best innovative adult learning initiative or project as well. Full details can be found on the EPALE post, which will be shared by Mariah right now on the chat. So please do check the chat for links on how to nominate or be nominated, hopefully, and join us in this wonderful celebration for adult learning in Malta. The other initiative I wanted to share with you is an update on something I have been sharing quite a lot recently. We have 2 contributor contests running this year. The first one has already finished, which was the first contest was for the best blog posted on EPALE. We are now in the evaluation stage. We're very pleased to see some really nice bits of writing for this contest, and now our evaluators are very busy looking at our blogs and deciding who the winner is. The winner will be announced in July. Please watch this space and we'll let you know. However, if you have not participated in contest 1, you are still in time to participate in the second contest, which is, as you can see from the slide, the best overall contributor. It started in March, the same as contest 1, but it will lead us all the way to the end of November. And by then we will choose the EPALE user who has posted most blogs, events, news, resources, etc. Full information can be found on the links that Mariah will be posting here as well. Yes, I'm keeping Mariah very busy today with a lot of posts because we're so busy. Then, yes, just in case you are not familiar with EPALE, we have created a lot of resources for users to be able to navigate the website. The platform is really sometimes daunting to people. People tell me, oh, I get a little bit lost. So our job as the NSS is to help guide you there. So I will show you a very short video about how you can contribute on the website as well. Okay. Okay, great. I hope you were able to hear that as well. And finally, yes, cherry on the cake. It is an absolute pleasure to have Rhoda Garland, Miss Rhoda Garland, the Executive Director of CRPD, with us today. And she will give us some very, very insightful stories and information about disability etiquette and access to education. Rhoda, I leave the floor to you. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop the screen share so you can take over.
Thank you very much. I will be showing a very quite a long presentation, but I'm going to go through the slides quite quickly. What I'm aiming to do today is generate some discussion so that we can hear your ideas and your perceptions, and then we have some questions at the end. If you want to ask questions, obviously that's fine as well. So I will start straight away with my presentation. This is part of the CRPD's remit. So the CRPD, the Commission for the Rights of Persons with Disability, is an organisation which is the regulator for the disability sector. And under our remit, one of the things that we are required to do under the United Nations Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disability is provide disability equality training, which raises awareness. Here you can see a couple of photos of some of our team. We have a team.
Rhoda, sorry to interrupt you. We can't see your slides yet.
Oh, okay. Hold on one moment.
Let's try that again. Don't worry, take your time. Yeah, I just want to make sure, of course, your slides are visible to our audience.
Is that better?
I think it's loading. Yes, excellent. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yes.
Sorry.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
So these are our disability equality trainers. We have a group of people with different impairments. We have somebody who has a visual impairment, somebody who is deaf. We have a lady with intellectual impairments, somebody with mobility issues, and another person who has autism. So we have a wide range of impairments so that we can answer questions and talk about all aspects of disability. In this presentation, I'm just going to give you a very brief overview of the legal basis for what we are doing, and then I'm going to talk a bit about etiquette. People get very worried about how they address people and what terminology they should use and whether they are doing things in the right way. And so I'm going to give some tips about how you can make sure that when you are communicating with disabled people, you are doing it in the right way. I'm then going to look at some accessibility tools which are available, especially with regard to providing education for adult learners. And then we have some questions at the end for discussion. So the CRPD, our organisation, was established under the Equal Opportunities Persons with Disability Act in 2000, and that Act looked at discrimination under various grounds and gave us the right to deal with complaints that were made by disabled people based on the grounds of disability. So when people felt that they were being discriminated against, they would be able to make a complaint to us, and we would liaise with the people they were complaining about, or speak to the shop owner about accessibility, and make sure that the disabled person had the right to access the goods and services or the service provision, that they were getting the right access to employment and also to education. The Equal Opportunities Act itself has now been superseded, and what we have now is the UNCRPD. This was a groundbreaking piece of legislation. It was written in the early 2000s by disabled people. And what it does is it covers every aspect of life you could imagine, and states what the rights of disabled people are under each section. So there is a section about education, there is a section about employment, there is a section about the right to privacy, about family life, about political participation. There are a lot of articles. There are, I think, 33 substantive articles covering different areas of life. And then there are some other sort of general articles talking about how the UNCRPD should be monitored. And countries were invited to ratify the UNCRPD. Malta signed up to the UNCRPD straight away in 2006, and then spent several years looking at ways of improving their own legislation to bring it more in line with what the UNCRPD was requiring. And we ratified the UNCRPD in 2012. That means that every couple of years we are required to report on the work that the government is doing in relation to each article. So we are required to say what policies we have in place and what actions we have taken to make education more accessible, or to make accessibility in general to shops and public buildings more accessible. So we do that on a 2 or 3 year basis, and then after the government submit its report, the CRPD, which is our organisation, provided a shadow report saying what we think about what the government has said. And after that, the CRPD committee at the United Nations go through the reports, and they have meetings with us, and they make recommendations as to how areas that we need to improve. There are only 2 areas of the UNCRPD which Malta has not signed up to. One of them is the right to have an abortion, because obviously that is illegal at the moment in Malta. And the other one was about voting rights, which is something which we are working on at the moment to ensure that disabled people actually have their rights when it comes to being able to access voting in a way that is appropriate and provides privacy and is done in the way that they want to. That includes things like having maybe a trusted friend who will go into the booth with you so that you are able to vote, or the provision of Braille so that people with visual impairments can access voting in the way that they prefer. So these are the principles. And now we're going to go, I didn't want to bore you a lot with the education, so now we're going to go into the etiquette. I don't know whether you could perhaps...
Shall we ask the first?
All right, question? Yep.
Okay, so everyone, you should be able to see the question on the chat. Over to you, Rhoda. Thank you.
Okay, I'm really just interested in finding out what your perceptions of different types of impairments and any that you've actually experienced, so that I can make I have some slides coming up about people with mobility impairments and visual impairments and things like that. So I don't know whether any of you would like to give some of your experiences. If you would, I will make comments as I see fit.
Maybe I can get the ball rolling and share an experience I've had. Okay. Yes, I'm going to let people flesh out their questions, and then we'll give them time to write in on the chat.
Okay, sure.
So something that has happened quite a few times, not too many times, but a good number, is when I've come across people who are blind in the street, and some of them have actually asked me for directions, or I noticed that I used to live in Slima, so the pavement situation in general in Slima is quite bad. and it's very easy to fall over and have an accident. So maybe I felt a little unsure about how much help I should give. For example, if you're helping a blind person who doesn't have a guide dog, for example, but I think in all of the instances that person had a walking stick. So I knew that they were, of course, mobile and they could get around, but maybe I saw that there might have been some sort of uneven pavement or something like that. So yeah, and maybe in that split second of seeing that person, maybe how should I have it? I normally just maybe very gently get their attention to, maybe move to the side. I don't move them, I don't touch them, but I maybe get their attention to, excuse me, I think you should move left or you should move right to avoid something. Is that right? What is the right approach when you're in that sort of situation?
I think that when you have people with visual impairments and even for people with mobility issues, the pavements in Malta are a bit of a disaster. And even in places where you have wide open areas like in Valletta, you have situations where there are plant pots and there are tables and chairs all over the pavement. And there is actually legislation which gives guidance about this, and I think they're supposed to be able to give permits that actually set out the distance that people are allowed to put tables and chairs. But I think that generally, if you see somebody who is using a cane, a guide dog will not have a problem, because a guide dog will actually be able to move somebody around a plant pot or a table and chair. But I think that if you see people who are about to run into things, then to be able to touch them maybe lightly on the arm and just explain that there is something there is a good way to do it. I think that some people might be offended by that, but I think from a personal perspective that it's better if you actually inform somebody before they actually bump into something. So I think just gently. The problem is not to surprise them. So if you speak to them as you are coming up to them and say, I just wanted to let you know, and maybe put your hand on their arm so that you can actually guide them away from any obstacles, then that's generally the best way to do it.
I remember on one specific occasion, and I'll just say this because we do have some comments on the chat. A person asked me to help them cross a road, which was quite a busy road, and I offered them my elbow so they would hold on to mine rather than me doing that to them. I felt like, okay, here's my elbow, like to your right side, and I just held it out, and then they, and then this person grabbed onto my elbow very gently while I guided them across.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's the small things. Is it like it's in the small things?
That's right. Yes, and a lot of it is common sense, but I think that the important thing is that you don't scare people. So
Exactly.
If they are obviously have a visual impairment, they're unaware that you are coming up to them. But if people are asking for assistance in crossing a road, then yes, that's exactly the sort of thing that you should be doing. I actually walk with crutches, so it's quite difficult and I go out regularly with people who have visual impairments, and because I'm also very short, I'm only just over 4 foot tall. So when we are going out, if I go out with somebody who has a visual impairment, then they usually put their hand on my shoulder so that they know roughly which direction I'm going in, but it doesn't stop me from using the crutches. So there are always ways and means of guiding somebody, but I think one of the important things is that they will tell you if they have a specific requirement when they're being guided, if they have a visual impairment.
I think the important thing is just to ask, right? To just signal that you're there. Yes.
Exactly.
I think I want to move on to the comments that we have on the chat at the moment. So yes, from Maria. So yes, she listed some types of disability. So people with mobility problems, sight impairment, mental disability. She says, I just ask, do you need help? And I try to go to their eye level. That's a very interesting. Yeah, would you like to comment on that? I try to go to their eye level.
That's quite contentious because in the presentation, which was put together by my DET manager, she has actually said that if you are with a person who uses a wheelchair, then you should try to maintain the same eye level as somebody in a wheelchair. And I think that if the person is using a wheelchair, that's fair enough. I think if you can sit down so that you are at the same level of them, then it avoids any discomfort. I, being small, find it a little bit patronizing to have people crouch down while they're talking to me. I'm never going to complain about it, but it gives the impression that potentially you are treating somebody as if they are a small child, and that can be problematic. But for wheelchair users, I think if you can get onto a chair so that you are at the same level as them, that's important. And actually to be able to make sure that you maintain eye contact even if you are above them, that's important. Don't please speak to the person who is pushing the wheelchair, because that's quite offensive. Shall I continue? We can do some more questions later on.
Yes, we have a few more comments to go through. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So Maria followed up, and then I'll go to Lindsay's comment, which is a bit longer. Maria commented that she never got any instruction about how to mix or talk with people with impairment. So this is my adding to it. Maybe she's unsure about what should be done, but I think we're going to cover it here in the slides. So
yes,
hopefully,
for sure.
Exactly. Lindsay, on the other hand, commented like this. So the European Disability Expertise in 2021 did research, and it was argued that in Malta, persons with disability are less likely to finish tertiary education than persons without a disability. I believe we're going to discuss that a little bit later in this session.
Yes.
What is currently being done by CRPD to tackle this issue, if any, please? So I guess we'll tackle that a little bit later. Thank you, Lindsay, for your question. Good. That's it for now. So yes, all back to you.
Lovely. So here's a few tips for you. With persons with mobility impairments, you need to respect the person's private space. I use crutches, and it's quite difficult for me to be able to carry on walking if people get too close to me, because I am worried that I'm going to hit their ankles. Again, people in wheelchairs need their space. If you imagine coming right up next to somebody, if you are standing up, for a non-disabled person, that can be quite intimidating. So giving people some space when they're using a wheelchair is important. Avoiding overprotection, addressing people in an age-appropriate manner. That's something that is widely inappropriate in Malta. I am frequently spoken to as if I am 5 because I am only 4 foot tall. Always ask the person before you help them. And here's the point about if you're a wheelchair user, use the same eye level. She also said as a small person, but personally I don't agree with that. But I'm sure small people will tell you if they want you to get down to their level. And also don't stand behind a wheelchair when you are speaking to them or somebody else. People with visual impairments, you need to introduce yourself. You need to always explain if you are entering or leaving a room, because they won't necessarily know that you have come in or that you are leaving. It's good if you can show people around the area that they're in. Quite often, people with visual impairments only need to be shown around an area maybe once or twice, and they are able to remember where things are quite well. So we had somebody working with us, a young guy who just left MCAST, I think, and he came for a vacation experience with us, and he was completely blind and he used a cane, and we showed him around the office once, and that was all that we had to do, and from then on he knew exactly where he was. So as long as you orientate the person by explaining first, that's good. When guiding, be guided. Again, just make sure that you are asking the person whether the way that they want to be guided is appropriate. And if you're using PowerPoint presentations and there are animations and pictures, then it helps if you can explain those. For people using guide dogs, there are some rules that you really do need to be aware of. Do not distract a guide dog if they're wearing a harness. These dogs are trained so that when they are wearing a harness, they are focused on assisting their owner. And if you distract a guide dog when it's wearing a harness, you could be potentially endangering somebody's life, because any animal is likely to look at you if you are trying to pet it. So it's important that you leave them alone if they are wearing a harness. And if you simply can't resist, at least ask the person with the visual impairment whether it's all right to pet the dog. It's also important to know that it is against the law to not let a guide dog into a place or onto a beach. They are not considered as pets. They are considered as assistive devices. And so it's important that they are treated in the same way. For people who are deaf or hard of hearing, there are sign language interpreters, and you can get their services from Agencia Support. When you are with somebody who's deaf, it's important that you look at the person and you talk slowly and clearly, that you use your hands, body movements and expressions, which will help them to understand, and make sure that your face is in direct light. Also, don't cover your mouth, obviously, when speaking, because they may also be lip reading. If you want to gain their attention, you can tap lightly on their back or their arm. And one thing that we do notice is that people tend to shout. They think that if they shout, then the deaf person will be able to hear. Well, strangely enough, if you are deaf, you don't hear. If you are hard of hearing, you can, and you're not being understood, then you can try writing something down for them, which is better than shouting at people. And when somebody is using a sign language interpreter, you need to speak directly to the person with the hearing impairment and not to the interpreter. For people who have intellectual disabilities, it's important that you make contact with them and have your first opinion of them is not that they won't be able to understand anything. So you have to start by assuming that they will understand you. The important thing is that you are able to explain things in simple words, and that, if necessary, you explain more than once. What you mustn't do is speak down to people as if they are children. One way of being able to assist people to understand is to use pictures where necessary. And you can also, if the person has a severe intellectual impairment, ask them to bring somebody who knows them along so that they will be able to explain. For people with mental health impairments, you need to be patient. You need to be prepared, again, to explain things more than once. if someone shows symptoms or anxiety, you need to try to calm them down. There is usually something that will trigger them, and it's important, if you notice patterns, that you make sure that you are trying to avoid those triggering effects. One thing that I would recommend you don't do is try to argue with them, because if they are in a heightened state, then this will simply make their situation worse.
Rhoda,
yes?
As we had agreed, I have put the second question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, and I have a feeling you might be a slide ahead, just to let you know.
Oh, sorry.
So yes, I've posted the question for our audience. What are your experiences with hidden disabilities? As usual, I'm going to give everyone a chance to think about that question. So for me, I'll get the ball rolling again. For me, the idea of hidden disabilities is quite multifaceted, because sometimes, for example, if someone has a missing limb, you might actually not even notice because they're wearing trousers. If you meet someone who has a neurological disorder like epilepsy, that might not be very apparent. Unless you actually see them having a seizure, an episode. There are quite a few hidden disabilities in my experience. We don't really see what people are going through unless we get to know them and they decide to share that. I think there's a lot of also stigma about the hidden.
Yes.
The hidden disabilities. Perhaps our audience can give us their experiences. Please feel free, if you want to actually ask a question, we can unmute you as well if you want to speak, but you can also write on the chat. Okay, Rhoda, I will give you some time to talk about this, but in the meantime, if our audience wants to ask questions, they absolutely can do so on the chat then.
Okay, so one of the things that is most widely, one of the more common impairments in Malta related to hidden disability is autism, and autism is a huge spectrum of impairment. People can be very, very severely affected by it, or they can be at the total opposite end of the spectrum and be very high functioning. What autism does is it affects part of the brain that deals with emotions and learning abilities, communication and memory. They are highly sensitive to different senses, which includes texture. People don't necessarily like having clothing on their arms, for example. Taste, smell, light and noise. Also colours. Very bright colours can be quite difficult for people with autism to cope with. There are also communication and cognitive aspects. One of the important things is that you treat them well and gently, and that you respect them as adults. And when you communicate with them, you need to speak normally. Sometimes they may have trouble in hearing or processing sentences. And if they take too long to respond, then it's perfectly acceptable for you to repeat what you have said, maybe using more basic structures of sentences. One thing you shouldn't do is joke or use metaphors or puns or sarcasm or irony, because they won't necessarily understand that you are not being literal. And their levels of comedy differs quite widely. They can have a tendency to be misguided and or confused, especially if you are using metaphors and puns and things. But given proper direction, they are very well able to follow through processes. It's important that if you are using audio, that the noise is not too loud, a quiet environment will increase their sense of ease and their comfort. And if you notice that people with autism are rocking or start pacing, and some of them carry fidget toys with them, you should allow them to use these methods, because what they are doing is they are calming down any small anxieties that they have so as not to reach a meltdown. There are obviously other hidden impairments, like, for example, diabetes and epilepsy, anxiety disorders, fibromyalgia. These may only be apparent when something goes wrong, but often these people are not taken seriously. So if somebody tells you that they have fibromyalgia, a lot of people assume that that's just being lazy and these people just don't want to work, whereas actual fact, it can be associated with high levels of permanent pain, which make it very difficult for people to function. And you may find that if you have people who are on courses, that there will be times when they might need to join online because they simply can't get out of the chair that they are sitting in because of the pain that they are experiencing.
We have a question, an experience from Lindsay. May I?
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
So Lindsay wrote, I had an experience where my lecturer told us that she had a hidden disability in her eyes. If she had not brought this to our attention, we wouldn't really have noticed. She also said that she needed to see things printed with a high font size to see notes properly, for example.
Yes.
So sometimes it's not, it's grades of disability, right? That can go under the radar. I also had a secondary question, if I may. Of course, a lot is done about autism for children, and I think I'm not a mother myself, but I know that perhaps the process to get to have a child diagnosed with autism, or to be on the autism spectrum, because it is a spectrum, obviously, is quite easy and straightforward. If someone who is an adult is not quite sure if they might be on the spectrum, what can they do instead of self-diagnosing, that is?
A diagnosis of autism, especially amongst women, is quite bad. Quite often women get to their 30s or 40s before they're actually diagnosed as having autism. And there are various educational psychologists and autism experts in the medical field who will be able to diagnose adults, but diagnosing an adult is more complicated than diagnosing a child. So it's a case of, and also people who have autism don't necessarily realize that that's what they've got.
Yeah.
They actually think that it's just the way they are. And then I know of a lady who had an autistic child, and it was only when the child was not diagnosed as having autism that she realized that these were actually identical traits to ones that she also had. And she went for testing and was told that she also had autism. So it can be something that people literally don't know they have. They just assume it's the way, that they are a little bit eccentric, or that they are just feeling antisocial, and they're not aware that they actually have an official diagnosis.
And that I think also might have the effect of normalizing autism,
exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Yes, we're I think very far from the kind of Rain Man,
Exactly.
Dustin Hoffman, Tom Cruise movie from the 80s. I think it was great to see someone like that, but of course that also set in motion maybe some misconceptions about what autism actually is and what it can be.
I think that Hollywood films tend to glamorize disability quite a lot, and whilst it's great that they are raising awareness about the condition, sometimes they can be quite misleading. So you have to be careful about Hollywood films. Forrest Gump was a well-loved film by half of the world, but it was appalling. It was an appalling scenario of showing how somebody with that type of impairment was behaving, and it upset an awful lot of people in the disability sector when it came out.
Okay.
And people don't realise that.
Of course, what you're saying makes absolute sense, but I've never really seen that from that perspective. So do you feel it actually did harm to the community?
I think it's a double-edged sword, because it raised awareness about the impairment, but it didn't do anything for addressing the realities of living with that impairment. And I think that the portrayal of him as this sort of superstar was a bit patronising. It's not a film personally I enjoyed.
Yeah. Speaking of videos, I think it's time to actually show that video. So, Rhoda, as we agreed, you can take off your screen share. We'll pass the screen share on to my trusty wing woman, Mariah. It's Friday. We can relax a little bit, so it's fine. Okay, so we're going to show a video. Would you like to introduce the video before we hit play?
This was a video which was created and written and stars people with disabilities. Everybody in the video is disabled, with the exception of the student who has a baseball cap, who is a CRPD employee, who was just so interested in the process that he wanted to take part. Who were we to stop him? So this is just to show what can go wrong if you don't treat people in the right way.
So just 1 second, we're having a slight problem with the sound, which is important. Yes, because we have some singing at the beginning of the video as well. A throwback to Eurovision to 1998, I guess, if anyone here is a Eurovision expert. I'm afraid not. No.
If you want, I will send the link and people can find it on YouTube. It might be better.
Let's just like one last time. Yes, just one last time. Make sure the toggle of the. Okay.
Let's try this one.
Okay, excellent.
Just like a dream that never dies. Another summer night by the ocean. Min ġibna kil-karaoke biex fl-istaflu. Nħossni rġajt sir teenager. Issa jktis il-lejla antik xo. Naughty boy, my friend. Insomma, jtoqgħod bil-aqal ma tifanga li ġibtak il-kejk forsi. Għax ħej dik it-tam zed tikber, tibqa' żejjerek se nisbiċċa ndawwarlek żigarella mqaddek u għallejt li klassi nġibrhom lilek minn flok l-Easter egg.
Skużi, Miss Gatt?
Qalbi ħammur għax wasal il-professor. This on being romantic over the phone while someone in a wheelchair is listening, please. I'm going to hurt his feelings. X'inġifieri x'għandu x'jaqsam li he's in a wheelchair? You're being insensitive to his situation, miskin. What do you mean he's not a miskin just because he's in a wheelchair? Of course he's a miskin. He's a poor miskin and he should be treated with respect and you're such an idiot. Bye. Good morning, Professor Grishti. Thank you for coming all the way from the NASA Space Center in San Francisco to meet my students. On behalf of the St. Nicholas School Administration, we are very happy to have you.
Wow, tista tbaxxi ftit.
Baxxi, of course. I said, good morning, Professor Grishti. Thank you for coming all the way from the NASA Space Center in San Francisco.
Għandi pjaċir, però jekk tista' ma tajjax daqshekk.
Sorry?
Tweża direttament fuq dejja onestament, ma nafx għalfejn.
I was being well, you know, nice, peress li war in a...
Il-problema f'saqja qiegħda mhux fuq dejja. Is-smieħ tajjeb, f'saqja not so much.
F'saqja problema.
U kif tista' żgur tapprezza.
Smieħ tajjeb.
Sajnu l-urnejn huma żewġ body parts differenti, mhux hekk?
My God, that's a really good observation. Very deep and intellectual.
To be honest, I was just being playful.
If everyone was as clever as you, I tell you. My God, how clever you people are.
Us people? Min aħna us people?
You know, people with this...
People with this...
People with this amazing intelligence. The light of the world you are.
Ma kontx forsi se tgħid people with disability hux?
Disability? Why would I say that's stupid? I mean, not stupid, you're not stupid, anzi brillanti inti. Stupid fis-sens li, what can I say it is today, eh?
Yes, it is. Clear skies, breeze.
Makes you just want to get outside for a jog. A log, like a Christmas log. I love Christmas log and tea and those little like Lulu with dipping.
Signora Gatt, qabel ma jislu studenti, qed tideskom bil-diżabilità tiegħi?
Disabilità? Well, I have a disability, as I noticed.
Don't tell me you didn't notice my wheelchair.
Love me nice. Now that you mention it, a wheelchair. I was wondering a bit what that was before. A bit, I was wondering, not a lot of these things really don't affect me. How cool! Cool and genius.
U lex genius, Signora Gatt, studjajt u stinkajt u wasalt.
Oh, lei, you are a genius.
Grazzi.
Genius.
Rajt xi affarijiet minn tiegħi lura.
You mean, kotba ġifieri?
Ma naħsibx li tista' taqra t-toast bil-marmaritik il-dal-għoda breakfast. Qed inkun umoristiku, Signor Gatt. It's a joke.
It's a joke, hilarious. Marmaritik, how humoristic you are. Ma, you are a genius and you're funny, even though you're not... Here come the students, the joy of my world. What a splendid honor to be part of their formation. Tomorrow's leaders, you know, I know each one of them like the back of my own hand. Good morning, Silvan.
Miss, jina Albert.
That's right, morning, Antoine.
Miss, jina Albert, ili repeater miegħek 3 snin ħanina mandolina.
I must be doing something right if we keep coming back from Averu.
Morning, Miss. Hello to the Alicia.
Alicia, kamil darba rrit ngħidlek biex tiġi l-iskola bl-uniformi bħalma jiġi kulħadd.
Miss, kamil darba ngħidlek li my daddy basically pays your stupid wage with the amount of donations he gives to the school. Ħax.
Miss, dan il-boyfriend.
No, sort as if she's so good for me. I wish I wouldn't have a boyfriend like him. You know, handsome and compact.
Kif xi ħaġa tkellem għata s-sewwa u bejgu professor Grishti such an honor. Read kolba sija kollha. Astrophysics 1, 2 and 3. Astrophysics Revenge. Astrophysics for Putis. Nista immislek ftit idejk. I mean immislek moħħok. I mean noħodlok moħħok. I mean noħodlok bidejk.
The pleasure is all mine.
Mela, settle down, please, Professor Grishti huwa l-ewwel astronauta Malti li se jmexxi missjoni spazjali man-NASA. Very, very special man. U qiegħed biex jagħtina talk dwar l-astrofisika. Please give Professor Grishti a welcoming applause. Yes!
Grazzi, grazzi.
Professor Grisci,
Grazzi, tista' tieqaf. Illum flok nagħtikom it-tok jiena se nħallikom tistaqsuni dak kollu li intom kurużi dwaru fuq il-ħolqien tal-univers, il-formazzjoni tal-grassi li tridu insomma.
Li rridu brolo.
Ekku.
Għandi waħda jiena. Int kif tagħmel pipi?
Oh my God, Adam.
Albert.
What a pastas. I'm sorry, Professor. He's from Zaytun.
Anka minn Zejtun. Allura?
Mistoqsijiet xjentifiċi, Albert. Sorry, Professor Grisci.
Okay, bro Lex. Mela, xjentifikament, California. Int kif tagħmel pipi?
Albert, ux veru.
Spot on.
Jien broloskop nagħmel pipi pretty much bħal kulħadd fuq it-toilet. Nimmira nħalli gravità tagħmel xogħla.
Profs,
Yes, Alicia?
for my birthday I'm getting a Porsche.
Okay.
Stanni ħorċat smijak għal fuq Instagram, please.
Fil-kas nuħdu għet wara t-tok, tajjeb?
Għax the thing is, photos with disabled people get several likes, it's true.
Mulej, mutini.
Għax like last time, my best friend Nina Joe, she's a liar and a kiss and when she posts, she only gets 20 likes. I'm surprised her parents still love her. At Christmas time, she posted this picture with her disabled cousin and she got 232 likes.
Indi bis-serjetà.
Okay, fine, it's 233, but one of them was hers, so you don't count it, eh?
I realized what an achievement that might appear to an obtuse piece of spinach like you, but Professor Grisci is the recipient of the Nobel Prize for Scientific Discovery.
But the thing is, Professor, her disabled cousin, all she has, like she's blind and not much of a miskina like you, for example, and people feel really good about themselves when they press a like for a miskin. Like that guy with the crutches, Oliver, the commissary of CRPD, when he posts has a runny nose. Even the Prime Minister likes his posts. He's a gold mine of popularity. I admire him personally.
Tista' titfalatu fuq dak il-loħ taħal li għandek.
Go home and snug your book, sight.
Kieku Paris Hilton tgħidlek biex taqqaxxar stuftajnek bil-glitter tal-ġubun tagħmilha.
Miss Katz, I'd like to report Manuela for mentioning God's name in vain.
Brolo de Janeiro, imma meta tagħmel number 2 l-istess bħal meta tagħmel number 1.
Tistgħu forsi staqsuni domandi relatati ma' suġġett jekk joġobkom.
Can I tell you?
Tell me.
Can I tell you?
Tell me.
Emma, can I tell you?
Or just come out and bloody say it.
About that picture.
Għaliex ruħi, il-persuni b'diżabilità mhux qegħdin fid-dinja biex jiġbdu simpatija tan-nies. Għandna narħajja normali bħal ħaddieħor li jridu ngħixuha.
But we could be front page on Love in Malta, ta. And Ben Camille would definitely want to marry me then.
I can say.
Okay, we still have a little bit left on the video, but we're running out of time.
Yes.
So I wanted to, of course, have the time to finish properly. Yes, Rhoda, of course, there are quite a few points that are raised here in a very humorous way, but still raise quite a few points beyond the humor. Please, go ahead.
So, what I wanted to finish by saying really is that there are negative attitudes, and these have been historic in Malta. These have been going on for a long time. It is one of the reasons why disabled people have not been able to complete their education, because they have left school with much lower educational qualifications because of the use of LSEs and a different curriculum, and that has meant that their progression into tertiary education is actually quite problematic. One, because they don't have the necessary skills in order to be able to do it, but also because they become dependent on LSEs, and that can cause just as many problems. It means that when they go into tertiary education, it's actually more difficult for them. So there are some things that you can do in order to make people's experiences better. Obviously, removal of physical barriers, removal of problems with accessing information, and information can be provided in various accessible formats. You can have the printed word, which is presumably what you give most of your students, but it's also possible to use audio, to also maybe use Braille. If you go to FITA and you have somebody who uses Braille, you can get things printed in Braille for them. For people with intellectual disabilities, we have easy to read, which puts things into shorter sentences with small definitions and pictures, which make things more easy for people to understand. Sign language, as you saw in that video, makes it accessible for deaf people, and also having an accessible website in the first place is actually very important. There are accessibility guidelines related to creating accessible websites. If you Google WCAG2, you will be able to see the sorts of customization that can go on, and can be coded into the website to make it accessible for people with visual impairments. Other things that they use include screen readers. Most young people now don't use Braille, they have screen readers, which means that when they hover over a picture, the screen reader that's attached and embedded in the laptop will actually tell them what the picture is showing. There are also codings so that you can have black on white and white on black, so you can change the contrast. There's magnification and various settings related to colour, so that very bright colours can be dimmed down for people who have autism and find strong colours difficult. When it comes to people who are hearing impaired, the use of subtitles in audio and video is useful. There is also sign language interpretation. There are not many sign language interpreters in Malta, but they all come from Agencia Support. And you can also display information in chats or on mobile or in emails, and that makes things a bit more accessible for hearing impaired people. Easy to read formats, as I mentioned before, are available in order to be able to allow people with autism, people with anxiety disorders, and not just people with intellectual disabilities to be able to access information, and that's also quite important. I have a few questions, if you like, that we can have a look at. I might just give you some information about them. So one of the things that I was looking at was the adaptations which can be provided for a person who is deaf to enable them to participate in a lecture. And for that, if they're not using their own sign language interpreter, allowing them to sit close to a lecturer so that they can lip read, having the lecturer pinned to the screen when you are doing online lectures, having easy to read formats and notes will always assist people who are deaf. With people who have visual impairments, it's very important to find out what their type of impairment is. I have a real problem in our office because I have one office that has two people with disabilities related to their vision, and one of them needs to have things very bright and the other one needs to have things very dim. And what we have done in order to make the office accessible is to make sure that the ceiling has tiles that are removed, so we can remove the light tile, the tile that provides light over the desk of the person who has a problem with light, and we can actually put an extra light above the person who requires a much brighter situation. So those are important things. It's important to realise that not everybody has the same type of visual impairment. This is especially important for presentations, because some people won't be able to cope at all unless they have white writing on a black background. And so finding out what your students need is actually very important. Other people will use magnifiers or have screen readers that do text to speech. People with autism are very unlikely to have a sensory overload in a class-based lecture unless the surroundings are really bright, or if there is excess noise, so you might need to keep your class quieter if they are being rowdy. But generally people with autism are not going to have a sensory overload in a class-based setting. People with intellectual disabilities, although they have an IQ of less than 75%, one of the misconceptions is that you should teach these people apart from other people, and that's really not necessary. If you can provide easy to read information to them, then they will be able to participate in a class very easily. They may well need to have something repeated every now and then, but certainly the people with intellectual disability we have at CRPD will always ask questions if they think that something hasn't been explained well enough. And the last thing that I wanted to mention was that it's not your right to know whether a person has an impairment. There is a lot of stigma attached to disability still, and as a result of that, what tends to happen is, especially people with hidden impairments prefer not to let anybody know. It makes it very difficult for CRPD as well, because if they then make a complaint, I can't take the complaint up on their behalf because they haven't informed the person that they had the impairment in the first place. So they are not required to tell you. However, if you suspect that somebody is having problems, it may well be worth just speaking to them quietly after the session and asking whether there's anything that you can do in order to make it easier for them to participate. I wouldn't mention impairment, I wouldn't mention disability, but just say you seem to be having some problems. Is there anything that I can do to help? I'm sorry, we've overrun.
I let you go on because of course this is quite important, but we're going to continue this conversation in our next webinar as well, in a way. So yes, excellent. So Rhoda, thank you so much for lending us this hour in your very, very busy schedule. I'm just going to bring up my last slide. Thank you to our small but very active audience. Thank you so much for joining us instead of going to the beach today, this afternoon. So I'm just going to say a few words to finish off this session. Bear with me. Yes, so as we said earlier, this session is being recorded because it will be shared on EPALE in the coming days, next week. Thank you, Maria. That's very kind. So yes, we are actually going to post, we're posting now a link for you to give us some feedback for this session. We, of course, will post about this on our socials, and please watch this space for the next webinar, which will be held on the 19th of July. I will not spoil too much about the theme for that session just yet, but it will also, and we're very grateful. We will also have Rhoda back again talking to us about her experiences and lots more to talk about. This hour, I have to be honest, passed very quickly. I could listen. We could have done a 2-hour webinar, but that would have been too much on Friday, maybe, for some of us. Rhoda, thank you so much for sharing things in such a simple and clear way as well. That's very useful for us. Good. So this brings us to the end of webinar 5. We will have our final webinar 6 next month, as I said. I hope you can join us for that one as well. From the NSS Malta team, Have a lovely weekend. Thank you for joining us. See you soon.